After many months of optimism and cooperation, relations on the Korean Peninsula have abruptly and violently turned negative. The newly elected South Korean President Lee Myung-bak has decided to get tough, insisting that aid to the North must now be linked to its denuclearization. That stance prompted a firestorm of angry rhetoric from the North, with Pyongyang threatening to reduce Seoul to ashes with a preemptive strike. I'm Taimur Nabili, and on this edition of 101 East, we ask just how serious is this latest escalation between the two Koreas? On April the 9th, Lee Myung-bak's Conservative Grand National Party secured a majority in the parliamentary elections. With a solid platform in parliament, the new president believes he has a mandate to take a new line against North Korea. Chan Tao-cho reports on a brewing storm and what it means to the people most affected by a country divided.
The Gyeongbok Palace in Seoul was built in the 14th century during the Joseon dynasty, when there was only one Korea. With North-South tension drumming up recently, it may be a long time before one Korea is possible again. The peninsula was split after World War II along the 38th parallel north latitude line. The Soviet Union and the United States used it to demarcate their zones of control. It became the de facto border when the Korean War erupted in 1950. The town of Chowon, dead center of the peninsula, suffered some of the heaviest fighting. Till today, remnants of war remind survivors of the hundreds of thousands who died.
Here's my name in the list. Park Sun-son. This is a monument for the soldiers in the Korean War who were from Chowon. Many of my platoon mates were killed.
Park Sun-son was born in the north in 1931. He defected to South Korea at the age of 20 and was ordered to join the army as a reconnaissance scout.
North Korea was controlled by an oppressive regime that ignored humanity. I couldn't take it. I left many family members behind. Every day I pray to God for reunion, but I have no idea where they are or if they are alive.
And that's not likely to change if Pyongyang delivers its threat to cut off ties with Seoul. This as a response to South Korean President Lee Myung-bak's insistence that humanitarian and economic aid to the north must come with strings attached. Inaugurated in February, Lee says he wants the communist regime to speed up denuclearization if it wants continued help from the south. But North Korean leader Kim Jong-il is adamant that nuclear matters belong to the international arena and has no place in North-South ties. One nuclear policy specialist disagrees. Dr. Kim Tae-woo is a senior research fellow with a South Korean think tank under the National Defense Ministry.
North Korea have developed nuclear weapons as a safeguard to their system, political system. Just if North Korea decided to use the nuclear weapons, its missiles can hit any targets within South Korea. Nuclear matters is international problem as well as a Korean problem. So we have a right and responsibility to intervene into their affairs.
And that is a shift from the past decade of engagement under the Sunshine Policy. Previously, Seoul's liberal leadership readily transferred billions of dollars in northbound aid and investment.
We tried all our power, by myself also, to reconciliation and cooperation between the South and North Korea. But new government cut the last 10 years contribution. When the North have no contact with the South government, it brings the mistrust. Then it results to the very dangerous wartime.
In recent weeks, as top-ranking officials from both sides made allusions to possible war scenarios, soldiers along the north-south border stayed on high alert. The demilitarized zone actually shows how it is so difficult to take the military out of the equation. After the ceasefire of the Korean War in 1953, both sides pulled their troops 2 kilometers each way from the front line to create a buffer zone. Till today, this buffer remains one of the most heavily guarded borders in the world. Located some 10 kilometers north of the Demilitarized Zone, or DMZ, the Kaesong Industrial Park has been a signpost of economic collaboration between the two Koreas in recent years. But in March, Pyongyang evicted South Korean officials from the complex in response to Seoul's tougher stance towards it.
The government officials only provided support services for businessmen whose companies continue to operate in Kaesong. I think Pyongyang didn't sack them to stop business ties. It wants to test President Lee's future policies on North Korea by seeing how he will react.
But such saber-rattling recently threatened to escalate into something more explosive. Unlike this long-range missile tested in 1998 that flew over Japan, North Korea reportedly fired short-range test missiles off its western shores and threatened to wipe out its neighbor.
In the Korean Peninsula, there is no alternative without the engagement policy.
I think they are purposefully exaggerating the expression because they want to domesticate the South Korea's North Korea policy.
For some, such intricacies of political brinksmanship mean nothing. After all, there was a time when things were a lot simpler.
Half of this bridge was built by the North before the Korean War, and the other half by the South after the war. For me, this used to symbolize reunification and reunion.
But these days, Paek Sun-son knows the chances of ever meeting the family he left behind are remote. As for the family he has since formed in Chowon,
Please let no more war take place, because it's a disaster. I want my children to live in peace.
Well, joining us now from Seoul to discuss the Korean situation is Song Young-sun, a member of South Korea's Parliamentary Assembly, and from Sydney, Professor Richard Broinowski, a former Australian ambassador to Seoul. Thank you both for being with us today. Let's just consider for a moment what's been happening recently with Pyongyang talking about reducing Seoul to ashes, calling President Lee a traitor and an imposter. Richard Broinowski, let me put it to you. Is this more of the same rhetoric, or are we in a slightly more dangerous situation now?
I wouldn't use the word dangerous. I'd say that he's ramping things up a bit. The North Koreans tend to do this. When they see something that they don't agree with or don't like, then they use rhetoric. And the North Koreans are very good at this. They're very skillful at using rhetoric, but we shouldn't hyperventilate about it.
Ms. Song, is Seoul intimidated at all by those comments?
Well, definitely, but not necessarily intimidated, but North Korea has repeated that kind of things. But definitely, Kim Jong-il tried to give us very strong message. If you don't agree with us, we are possibly, applying force in the near future. That was his message.
What about from the South Korean side then? Richard Broinowski, were you surprised by President Lee's approach? I mean, a lot of people before his election were thinking that he would carry on with the existing framework of negotiations. He himself seems to have amped things up a little bit. Did that surprise you?
No, it hasn't really. I mean, as the head of the Grand National Party and as a more right-wing leader, we can expect that he will take a tougher approach towards North Korea. But the bottom line is that the South Koreans do not want to see any kind of rhetoric leading to open hostilities. That's the last thing that I think either country wants at this time, especially the South Koreans.
Well, Ms. Song, what exactly is President Lee trying to achieve?
We have been applying sunshine policy or sometimes engagement policy for the last 10 years. But that is not true. Only we have been applying sunshine policy. The difference between sunshine policy and engagement policy is sunshine policy is a unilateral giving. And on the other hand, engagement policy is it requires reciprocity. So President Lee trying to do in the future is he requires the reciprocity of the two countries.
Okay, that's an interesting distinction. Richard Bronowski, did you think the sunshine policy was all giving? Was North Korea winning every step of that particular policy?
Absolutely not. The sunshine policy was a very good conciliatory policy by Kim Dae-jung and before him by No Tae-yoon, indeed. But you have to consider that after the 1994 framework that was brokered by President Jimmy Carter, the North Koreans from 1994 to 1997 permitted American nuclear inspectors to come to Pyongyang and to go to their nuclear facilities. They stopped the reprocessing of their plutonium, and for that time, they actually were very conciliatory and helpful towards the general progress towards some kind of conciliation.
Ms. Song, as far as you're concerned, what exactly about the sunshine policy didn't you like?
No, I don't agree with his point in a few senses. In the first place, sunshine policy, the idea was good, but the assumption of the application of that policy was very, very erroneous and fallacious, because Kim Dae-jung assumed that if we provide good assistance to North Korea will follow in democratic way, such as opening its economy and also changing its political system, which is a totally erroneous, assumption.
It's an interesting distinction, and clearly, I guess we have to assume that the sunshine policy is now over. So let's just take a pause here, and we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll consider what the new policy after the sunshine is going to involve and how it might change things. Stay with us here on 101 East.